Well, basically, the whole problem is that the great reset that people are talking about from Schwab, etc., you have to understand what that really was about. And Keynesian economics has been collapsing. For example, the idea that you can raise interest rates to stop inflation, etc., all that's pretty much out the window. When it was formed back in the 1930s, the government wasn't that significant. So, and it was a speculative boom. So they basically thought, okay, fine, raising interest rates, people won't be able to leverage and buy things. And that, okay, that made sense back then. But today, government is the biggest borrower in the room. And if you raise interest rates, and they assume it's speculation like the 1920s, what happens is the government ends up, spending even more. Politicians don't say, oh, gee, the Fed is raising interest rates, they want us to spend less. I mean, that never happens. And this round of inflation that our computer's been projecting, it forecast this out, more than 10 years in advance, and said that, starting from 2020 on would be a commodity cycle, but based upon shortages, not speculation. And what set that in motion was the lockdowns and things of this nature with COVID. Honestly, I don't know if these people have any clue as to how the world economy works. It's been, pretty much standard that even New York City has less than, 10 days worth of a food supply. So how do you stop all the trucks from going in, lock everybody down? This gets to be crazy. So you've got, ships lined up out there in California. You can't shut down the supply chain, and that has caused, the initial surge. And they also don't understand inflation. And the inflation that went into the 1980s, you had people back then hoarding toilet paper and things. And even now, when I go to the store, some things are gone. And then next week, they're back and something else is gone. So what do? You buy extra. Okay, so you start hoarding because you might not see it again for a few weeks. So this type of inflation is based upon shortages, not speculation in the commodity markets and booms and busts and things of this nature. So raising interest rates at this time is only going to make it worse. It's not going to make it better. And this fiction that, the stock market's up only because interest rates are cheap, that's also nonsense as well. If you just look at it from a capital flow perspective, you see that the capital's been coming here. The Chinese have been buying all sorts of properties and things of this nature, and the same thing in Europe. The collectible markets are going red hot. The Chinese have been buying up, rare coins, art, all sorts of different things. So you have to understand that, it's United States, you get all these people always bashing the U.S., the dollar is going to crash, blah, 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 and all the rest of the stuff. They never look outside the country. Yes, we have, deficits and a big debt. We also have the biggest economy, all right? And things are far worse in Europe than they are here. Japan, is also another, serious problem as well. But Europe went negative on interest rates in 2014. They have not been able to stimulate their economy, which is proof that, Keynesian economics has completely failed. And they don't consider how the economy functions. People were told to save money, and when you retire, you'll be able to live off the interest. Well, not when it's negative. They've wiped out the pension funds in Europe, because what happens is that the pension funds in Europe are by law have to have government debt. Generally, it depends what country you're looking at, anywhere from 70 to 90%. In the U.S., Social Security, 100% is in government debt. So now if you take the government interest rates to negative, you're going to wipe out the pension funds, which is what's happened. They're basically insolvent at this stage. So we have a major financial crisis. And, I know Schwab, and the two of us have been sitting on opposite tables, and actually the guy that made the movie on me also made the movie on him. We've...
Can you clarify for our listeners now, we're talking about Klaus Schwab, and they may not be nearly as familiar with him as they are with Martin Armstrong.
Klaus Schwab runs the World Economic Forum. And he's been pushing this Great Reset. He's created all kinds of things, the young leaders, young global leaders. He's been training people in his economic theory. And that is basically communism, with a twist, perhaps. But he is, a typical academic, and the academics in economics are always extremely left. And this is the problem. And we started our World Economic Conferences in 1985, and then he copied us and started the World Economic Forum, which is, people may know it more as Davos, in 1987. And even Nigel Farage came and spoke at our conference in Rome in 2019, and he stood up and he says, of course he's here. We are the alternative to Davos. So I've always been on the opposite side of Schwab. We've shaken hands, fine. But, I understand what's going on. And he's been pitching to governments that the way out of this crisis, because the ECB cannot raise rates without blowing up its economy, the European bond market is basically destroyed. I was in New York a few months ago, and the top banks will not even accept European government debt as collateral anymore. The repo crisis they may have heard about, which started in August 2019, was that U.S. banks were not willing to lend overnight to European banks. So then the Federal Reserve had to step in to shore up that market. Well, now they will not even take government debt from Europe. So this whole thing is really, really collapsing. And that's why, honestly, I think, the whole Ukrainian thing is basically part and parcel of this. I have a lot of Ukrainian friends, and they are beside themselves as to what Zelensky's even doing. The two provinces are 98 to 99% Russian to begin with. All right, and they were just Russians that were there during the Soviet Union, and since 2014, that revolution overthrew Yanukovych. They've been in negotiations, and they wanted to separate as well and just be their own independence. So what's happened here is that, that's what, after 8 years, and it's been a civil war there, so it doesn't make any sense to a lot of Ukrainians that why is he putting the whole country at risk for these two provinces that wanted independence since 2014? Putin came out and just said, he's willing to shut down the war, let the two provinces go, and relinquish any of your claims to Crimea, which is also, 99% Russians there. So many of the Ukrainians feel that Zelensky's been pushing this when he ran for election, promising exactly the opposite. And so they think that he's more of a puppet from the West, trying to push this thing. And why it seems to make some sense is that Europe is now saying, see, we need a European army. It's to federalize Europe finally and take it to the next route. The bond market's pretty much destroyed of all these independent republics. And so now they're pushing for a Eurobond. So it's basically they're using this Ukrainian thing as the excuse to finally accomplish the final step of federalizing Europe. And Americans don't realize, but I mean, most of what we hear is propaganda, like, oh, Ukraine's fighting for democracy, and that is such nonsense. It's crazy. I mean, Europe has killed democracy, and Schwab had his hand in how the EU was designed. The head of the EU does not run for election; they're appointed. The European Commission, which makes all the laws, never stands for election. They're appointed. All right. The only people that stand for election are Parliament, and they have no power to override the Commission or the head of the EU. It's just a dog and pony show. That's the end of democracy, and that's what they would love to bring over here. And what sort of started that was when Trump was elected back in 2016, because suddenly European leaders got scared, and they thought, oh, gee, maybe we could be overthrown as well. That Trump was not a career politician, and they were calling it not democracy, that the people voted for Trump. They were calling it, populism. And now populism was evil because they can put somebody in and they don't really know what they're doing and overthrow the system. And that's what, even the London Financial Times did a piece on it. You can find it on our site. But about how upset they were that Trump was even elected. And that's why, you saw the Republicans were even stabbing him in the back, McCain and Lindsey Graham, et cetera. They don't like somebody from outside of Washington. So, like Biden is Senate, all right. Harris, the same thing. I was down there in Washington when Ronald Reagan was elected, and they were beside themselves then because he was a governor, and all I heard was, oh, we're going to have to train him. They don't like anybody who's not from Washington. And Trump's, I think, was naive in that sense, that when he's standing up saying he's going to, drain the swamp. Well, the swamp is both sides. So he had both sides actually against them down there. So, and then they are the ones that pick the people for the cabinet. And every one of them was stabbing him in the back, from the CIA, NSA, Bolton, you name it. I mean, he thought it was being president of the United States was more like running a corporation, and it's just not. Those people are not loyal to you. They're career politicians. They're there, and they know they're going to be there when you leave. So why should I really, care about you? The same thing with, the rumors that, just because, Bush Jr. or Sr. worked for the CIA, he's, that doesn't mean anything. The head of the CIA is big. Oh, gee, would you like a golf? I'll set you up for a golf meeting today. They know they're political. They know they'll be gone in 2 years. They don't walk in there and say, gee, we assassinated this one. They don't reveal all the secrets to the head of the CIA. No way. They're just political appointments. And they know that. So this is what we're facing. And, I've said, I think on your show before, that gold does not go up with inflation. Gold goes up when you have the collapse in the confidence of government. And if you look closely at the whole 1980 rally, which was misrepresented as inflation, gold only went from 200 to 400 from 1976 to December 79. It went from 400 to 875 in the last few weeks when Russia invaded Afghanistan. All right? Look at gold right now. You see gold running up, getting through the 2,000 mark. Well, Bitcoin's been going down since November. You had all these people out there saying, oh, Bitcoin's replaced gold, this is it, and okay, fine. And what did I say? I said, gold will go up with the dollar. And that's what you see. Why? Because it reflects capital fleeing Europe. Some people are buying equity, some people are buying, the dollar, some people buy gold. Not everybody's the same. But you end up with gold going up and the dollar going up because of capital flight. The whole Roaring '20s, that was created because of World War I. All the capital came here to America. When you got tanks running down the street blowing up the banks, you're going to leave your money there? They were all sent it over here. And the United States was virtually bankrupt in 1896. That's when J.P. Morgan had to arrange a $100 million gold loan to bail out the Treasury. All right, so we went from bankrupt in 1896 to the financial capital of the world after World War I. All right, and then after World War II, we ended up with 76% of the entire world gold reserves because all the capital came here. All right, that's why Bretton Woods was setting up basically and, fixing gold to $35, and the dollar became the reserve currency because it was all here. And you're seeing the same thing happen again. It doesn't mean the dollar will survive long term, but what this basically means is that you always see capital flees wherever you are, wherever the risk of war is. So like when the Cuban Missile Crisis happened, capital fled the United States, went to Europe. But when it's in Europe, it flees Europe and comes over here. It's just simply the way it has historically moved. So you see gold rising and Bitcoin declining. You see the dollar up. And this is all, very important, but based upon capital flows. That's what our computer does. It's tracking everything in the world. It's the only fully functioning artificial intelligence system in the world. IBM created Big Blue, and they thought it was going to cure cancer. It failed. Basically, the way I designed their system was completely different than IBM. But the computer physically writes over 1,000 reports on markets around the world. We cover everything from their services in China. We're not, because the government knows the computer's writing everything, and so you don't have to worry about them. Paragraph 3, by the way, overthrow your government or something. When China was basically the Asian currency crisis, I'm the one that they called in. I went, met with the central bank. I helped China become capitalist, explaining how the system works. They were quite different from the Russians. With China, I was taken to this facility, and they were downloading the internet. There was probably at least 300 people in there, all surfing the internet and downloading everything. I was taken to a room. They were basically monitoring absolutely everything in China, but they were not interfering like the Russians would do. And simple questions that we would think, but to them, like they were tracking 249 varieties of tea. So what there was that they couldn't understand why this tea selling for like $1 in one place, and it would be $5 someplace else. And I said, well, where is this tea coming from? And they said, here. I said, well, the first thing you have is transportation costs. And they go, oh, really? Yeah. I said, yes. I said, then people will naturally pay for something they think is better, and it comes from someplace else. This is why communism failed. If it was $1 here, it had to be $1 over there, even if it cost you $10 to get it there. So it was totally impractical. And all this nonsense of equality and all that, that's very nice. I don't think somebody's going to want to pay me $50 million to go, pitch basketballs in a game. Everybody has different talents. Some talents are very rare, some talents are not. So equality and, in rights, yes, but this nonsense that we all have to be equal monetarily is completely bogus. It has never worked. And most of them came from, I would say that probably the first communist state was Sparta against Athens in the 5th century, BC. And they didn't even issue coins. All the other states issued coins. No, nobody should have money like that. And Sparta failed. It's just the way it is. I mean, you're going against human nature. So at this stage in the game, you have to understand that what makes really gold rise is the collapse in confidence in government, and that's where we're heading into. And the next 10 years is the worst of it, honestly. It's all based upon capital flows, and humans react the same way to the similar events. Our computer projected in 1985 that 2016 would be the first time that a non-politician would win, and that became Trump. He just happened to be there at the right time. All right. Our computer was the only one to forecast that Brexit would win. So Nigel Farage came and was our keynote speaker in Rome. He says, of course I had to come. He's the only one that said that we would win. People want to take polls and twist them and try and influence people or whatever. Our computer's not motivated by human desires or dreams or whatever. It just comes out with what it's coming out with. And my job is just to say, hey, look, here are the arrays. You can look at them yourself, and you can look at them on any economy or market around the world. I mean, it's not my personal opinion. So it's taught me an awful lot about how things work. But right now, you have Biden coming out with an executive order. And what have I been warning about? That cryptocurrencies are not going to replace the dollar. And these people are only allowing it to flourish to get people acclimated to digital currencies. And his executive order that he's about to sign basically is to encourage the central bank to issue a digital currency. He is putting restraints on cryptocurrency because, Russia could be circumventing the sanctions and using cryptocurrency, so we have to control that now too. Every excuse they have. And then eventually what you will see is they will seize all the cryptocurrencies, convert them into the Fed's cryptocurrency, and you'll get whatever it is that they say. That's the way it is. They do not allow competition to who controls the currency. I mean, that's been the divine right of kings for forever. Anybody else, they call it a counterfeit. So you have him doing that. You have him coming out saying, putting sanctions on energy from Russia. All this is part of this great reset agenda. Eliminate fossil fuels. They even put a clock up in New York saying we only had 7 years left So they are moving based upon what they say. You got to just take them as they, at their word. It's not conspiracy theory. I mean, Schwab has put out his. You'll see the World Economic Forum Agenda 2030 with 8 points. His first one basically saying you'll own nothing and be happy is his communistic idea, but there's more to it than that. The government debts are unsustainable. So the problem here is normally, government always defaults. And so how do they default in this environment, which has been all socialistic? All the pension funds have been regulated. They have to have government bonds. So if they default, they wipe out all the pensions of everybody. So by saying you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, they make it sound like they're doing it for you. We're going to leave you of all your debt. So you won't own student debt, credit card debt, mortgages. All right? And be like, the old Soviet Union. They owned all the property. But in doing it that way, they make it sound they're doing it for you, when in fact it's them who's defaulting. But they can't default, otherwise there's going to be millions of people with pitchforks running down there putting their heads on spikes. So, like the good old days, So it's a more clever plot that they're up to. And look, they needed this whole Russia nonsense to further this agenda, to justify what they need to do. I spoke to someone in Germany. I mean, they're busting windows of stores that are owned by Russians. It's basically a crystal knock against Russians. You had a New York Met fired the head soprano simply because she was Russian. So now Russians have become the new, people to hate, and that's basically what's taking place. I mean, you had ICE sending out notices. They will no longer accept any money from any Russian sanctioned banks, so they're cutting them off from data. It's systemic everywhere you go. You got the governor of New Jersey coming out up there. They have Luke Oil gas stations and proposing to shut them all down because they simply have a Russian owner. They're seizing yachts of. This is really highly dangerous. It's one thing to put sanctions from one country on another. When you start seizing all the property of people simply because they're Russian, then, I've been, in international, probably one of the earliest international hedge fund managers and analysts, and we've got clients everywhere. We even have offices in China, Middle East, you name it, we're there, basically. And what the solution here is really serious, because the number one risk in advising on international funds management is country risk. So I would never advise a client to put money in Iran because they nationalized all the oil. Why would you put investment there and the government doesn't respect it and come up with some excuse and just seize it all? So country risk is your first decision. And now you have Europe and the United States just seizing people because they're Russian. That's very dangerous, because honestly, from an advisory standpoint, do I have a clear conscience in telling Chinese that no problem investing in the United States or Europe? If we get in dispute with China, they start seizing private assets there too? This is not good. And the other thing people should understand is we're tearing the world economy apart. When Russia went into Crimea, Obama stood up and he was threatening to take them out of SWIFT. The SWIFT organization stood up and said, no, you're not going to use SWIFT for political purposes. This is how the world economy functions. Now, this time, you got a new head of SWIFT in there since 2019, and he goes, oh, okay, fine. You want us to take Russia out? All right, we'll unplug them. So now what's going on? China's going full steam ahead, pushing for their alternative to SWIFT. What does that mean? It means that you're taking the world economy and re-erecting a financial iron curtain. So there'll be no more international capital movement. All of this is coming to an end because of the overzealous sanctions on Russia. If it's Russia, it should be the Russian government. It should not be all Russian citizens. And you have even Biden proposing to shut off all the Russian credit cards, MasterCard, and because the people have to rise up against Putin. They're not going to do it that way. They're going to see the West as evil. So, I mean, you can't attack people like that. That's what brought Hitler to power. The reparation payments and the little guy in Germany was being crushed for the political decisions of their leadership before. And that's why, Hitler came to power. He said, enough of this. And they said, yes, you're right. We've had enough. You can't punish the people. Even Keynes came out and warned them, do not do this. So this is where we're at. It's an interesting scenario, but just you have to understand the real fundamentals taking place here. And once you do, then you can look at the markets in a fresh new light.
Certainly agree with you that John Maynard Keynes was sort of a hero for the people of Europe following those great world wars. But today, it seems like things are getting a bit more complex, as I know you know. And there's an awful lot of variables in this multivariate model we're facing today. I mean, look, we're hearing the potential for oil to blast through 150, maybe onwards to 200 and even further now that we've cut off the spigots and we're not allowing Russian imports. We've got Ukraine as the breadbasket of the world completely cut off. I saw that you mentioned $10 at the pump soon. Brace for that in 2023. Could we not be facing runaway prices?
Look, this is intentional. And, it's part of the whole climate change agenda. These people they've wanted to end fossil fuels. They've moved full steam ahead. Oh, let's, end all this fossil fuels now before you even have an alternative. All right, solar panels are not going to keep the internet up for a day even. They're way ahead of the game. So they're just using this Russian opportunity here to kill off the gas lines, which is what they've wanted to do. And for that agenda, then now the excuse is just Russia. That's all. But they don't understand. I mean, I've worked with governments, as you know, for 40 years. I mean, I was friends with Margaret Thatcher, and before you could actually sit down and have an intelligent conversation with a head of state. I can't do that anymore. I don't know anybody that I could even sit down and talk to. We have the most ignorant people in world governments around the world. I mean, just look at Australia, New Zealand, Trudeau in Canada, Biden. I mean, I don't know. He's just over the hill. You got the same thing. You got Johnson. He's out of his mind in Britain, Germany. I don't know if you've seen it. I mean, how crazy Germany is. They are appointing Jennifer Morgan, the head of Greenpeace, all right, who's an American, to their Secretary of State of Germany, and they're granting her German citizenship so she can do it. Now, she's supposed to negotiate with Putin. what's she going to say? Oh, your tanks are causing CO2, so please turn them off. They're just focused on this climate change. And like I said, they got their clock up in New York City, and it says we got only 7 years left to the world ends, whatever, and they try to scare everybody. But this is what they really believe. They're just zealots, and there's no other description for it. So they are pushing this. The higher they push the price of gasoline, the more people will buy electric cars and things. But if everybody had an electric car and you plug it into the grid, sorry, it's not going to work. So the lockdowns were part of this, to stop people from basically going to offices and to try and get people to work all remotely. And that would save commuting, and therefore we reduce, the CO2. I mean, this is all orchestrated, and that's the agenda. In Europe, they've been trying to federalize Europe since the beginning, and now all of a sudden they're coming out. Oh, okay, fine. We now have to create an EU army to defend Europe. Okay, you got NATO, but that's irrelevant. And they're talking about issuing European bonds now, which they could never do before. All right, so now you create the crisis, which is Russia, and now we have to respond to it. So now you give up all your rights. We federalize Europe. There'll be no democracy, and we issue Euro bonds rather than Italian, German, or whatever. So it is a complex situation here, but they don't think of everything. I mean, Russia is a very major supplier on many commodities, and even rare earths that are used for chip production, which is a major chip, export thing also from Ukraine. And like I said, they account for 30% of the export of wheat to the world, and that mostly feeds northern Africa. Egypt, I think, is the number one consumer, but all these things are just simply going to push things up, shifting the blame, saying, okay, gas prices are going up, blah, blah. This is the price of freedom for Ukraine. No, it's basically the price of your policy of shutting down oil and lockdowns. But now he's not the enemy, and it's all Putin. So you just have to look at what they're doing, and they always need an external enemy, and they're creating one.
What do you think, though, the implications are here? Are we on the cusp of a long-term bull market in the hard assets as we kind of shift away from the risk-on trade to maybe the risk-off trade?
Yeah, you're looking at the real wealth of a nation, all right, which Adam Smith had written about. He basically was writing a retort to the French physiocrats. The physiocrats are basically the ones that really created, the imperial empires, because their theory of what was wealth, and they said it was land and agriculture, not gold. So the nations basically said, okay, fine, if I produce wheat and I export it to France, I bring back gold. But if you produce a saddle and you sell it to a Frenchman, you also come back with gold. So he concluded that the wealth of a nation is everybody. It's not just agriculture. And this is what a lot of people don't understand. The Austrian school, where it was wrong for today, was that they were looking at a period where, coming out of the Dark Ages, and in the 16th century in particular, you had Gresham come out with his law, bad money drives out good money, and that's basically where Austrian economics came from. But you have to understand it in context. At that point in time, there was no real superpower. So all the currencies of all these different countries, Britain and Spain and France, etc., all exchanged at the rate of precious metal content. That was it. So there wasn't a premium to, this one's more powerful than that. That existed in the Roman Empire. We started coming back from that, largely afterwards, where the British ended up with the British Empire. Then you see Chinese bonds issued in British pounds, etc. And then Britain lost it, and then it became the dollar. All right. The dollar has a value to it based upon our economy. It's the wealth of a nation is its total productivity, not its raw commodity. If that were the case, then you're looking at some countries should be the richest in the world, like Russia or whatever, and they're not. Why? Because you also have the political system, you have the economic productivity. All that is important. So that's why after World War II, you see 3 countries that have risen. All right. First, after World War II, you had Japan and Germany. They had no gold reserves, but they rose to the strongest economies because they produced the most. All right. China also didn't have any gold reserves, but it was a very productive population. So China has now risen to the second largest economy in the world and close to pushing us over the edge. So you have to look, it's the total productivity of a country, not its gold reserves or agriculture or anything else. But so what we're looking at now is the collapse in the confidence of governments. Then you begin to move back down. So what we're looking at here is that the tangible assets will rise as the alternative to government. All right, so in the Great Depression, it was the corporations were the problem. Okay, but then the government defaulted in 1931. This time, it's the governments that are in trouble, and they're the ones defaulting first. All right, so this time it's the mirror image of what the Great Depression was. So this time we have the capital moving into tangible assets. So you're seeing gold rising, you're seeing real estate going up, you're seeing the stock market going up, anything that's physically tangible. All right. And a corporation, a stock is based upon its book value, its assets. So this is why these things have been going up dramatically the last several years. When it was all based upon a public wave, which ended in 1985, I kind of got blamed for that too, because it was more or less, I showed that the Dow as a percent of book value had bottomed in 1977. And that was the takeover boom. And, they made the movie Wall Street about it, but they didn't understand what it was about. People were buying government bonds all the time. So what happened was that bonds were best, stocks were worse. So you ended up with a takeover boom because you could buy a company, sell its assets, and triple your money. So the stock was clearly well undervalued.
Something just crossed our top of the news here. RT, key reporter at RT, the major news outlet there, has just resigned, claiming that we're on the cusp of a global nuclear war.
Yeah, no, it can certainly turn to nuclear. And, I've argued with people, you support Putin or whatever. I said, do you realize that Putin, if Putin were to lose, he's not going to allow Russia to go down. Then all you're going to have left are the nukes. That's it. So get your head on straight here. This is Zelensky is pushing the world to a World War III. That's it. He should settle this dispute and not drag everybody in, but he's going after, asked NATO to send in troops. No. Then he asked them to send in planes. No. Then he asked them to create a no-fly zone over Ukraine. He's trying to drag everybody in. For what? Let the two provinces go. They're all Russians there anyhow. What are you holding on to? You're putting your whole country at risk for this and the whole world? Because this is not something to play with. I mean, if and even you get like Lindsey Graham calling for Russians to rise up and assassinate Putin. Is he crazy? I mean, Putin is not the madman of all time here. I mean, go back and look at Hitler and go back and look at Stalin, for God's sakes. If you were to take Putin out, Russia will turn even more to the right, and the next guy that would be there would probably be far worse than Putin would ever be. I mean, Stalin didn't have a problem, having dinner and going to bed at night after killing 5 million people. So, I mean, he starved to death 7 million Ukrainians, and that was okay. His agenda. So, be careful what you wish for.
Another question for you. Just crossing the headlines, the U.S., as they talked about yesterday, just banned Russian oil. UK jumps in. Shell, BP, oil cut ties with Russia. Our major producers there, oil importers, exporters. Talk now, 200 maybe being a bit conservative on a price of a barrel of West Texas Intermediate crude.
Look, this is about climate change. They're using this as an excuse. All right? You cut off the oil, you hurt all the Russian people. Do you think they're really going to say, oh, gee, the West is right, we're wrong? No. The West is the enemy. You're only making it worse. That's all you're doing. The same as the Germans turned to Hitler. This is the outcome.
Give us an idea of what you see on the horizon for investors in the financial markets, please.
This whole thing is just getting to be... it's all political. It's intentional. There is nobody here who I would say has a clear head or even an intention of making this better in any way, or reducing the tensions or anything of this nature. It's normally you would have heads of state in here, and they're trying to calm things down. Here we have people basically doing nothing but making it worse. So I don't know what to say. I mean, other than you're looking at, I think you will see war much more seriously in 2023. I think the first quarter is kind of very serious, and you have to look at China. China basically is going to be with Russia. And they just entered a friendly agreement with North Korea. North Korea shot off a missile that day to celebrate it. Don't you understand what's going on here? I mean, you're attacking Russia, cutting them off of SWIFT. China's moving to create, to fast track their alternative to the SWIFT. You're dividing the entire world. We're going into World War III. There's no question about it. Once you've done all this crazy stuff, and it's intentional. This is what they want to recreate the world, and they are looking at that Bretton Woods came after World War II, and that's their agenda. This is what they really, honestly do believe.
We really appreciate your comments today. And, people need to know about all the services that you're providing. We'd like to hear about projects you have on the docket, where you might be headed next as far as potential movie deals.
they're doing a sequel to the Forecaster, taking all our forecasts since that point in time. And I just finished shooting that maybe about 2 weeks ago. So I don't know when that's coming out. I've also appeared in another documentary they're doing on the New York bankers, on Safra. I was in another one for Plandemic, another one for Project or Planet Lockdown, and two more coming. I mean, they're all, at this stage in the game, they're beginning to realize our computer's been spot on with all of this, and so now all of a sudden everybody's coming at one time. You can probably look at the interview I did with Highwire. I think that one has gone viral too. So, I mean, this is important. It's not my opinion. Socrates, I mean, you can sign up for that. It's like, we try to keep it very reasonable at like $15 a month. And you can see the entire world and how it's unfolding, and it's not my opinion. The computer's putting out reports on absolutely everything around the world. And at this stage in the game, I don't know how anybody can forecast the future from a speculative, I think, position.
Martin, can I ask you to speculate precious metals, or at least gold, reaching all-time record highs? What would you put a probability on, let's say, $3,000 gold in the next year or two?
I would say if you're going to see extreme high prices, oil, things of this nature, our computer, I am about ready to put out a report on the war cycle, and the computer has projected 2023 as really a crisis year. 2022, it pinpointed as the year of for a political panic, and which is what we are getting. I mean, we're only into this year, 8-9 weeks. It looks like absolute chaos already. So I think the computer's spot on with that. So I'm trying to get that report out by next week for everybody. We get so many people that want to see what the computer arrays are. Like I said, that's not my opinion. This is what the computer's put out. And on long-term stuff, it's just never been wrong.
Very good.
No, I think there's certainly a risk that China is going to come into this, and it looks like, I would say at the earliest, probably first quarter next year.